Thank you, fellow crewmates. I'm off. And when I return, I shall be a cabin man.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. Today, we're going to be talking about the High A Lake County Captains, who play in the Midwest League just east of their parent club in Cleveland. I'm going to be talking later on in this episode to Dan Simon of Studio Simon, who created the branding for this team. I'll be speaking with Brad Seymour, who was the general manager in 2009 when they switched to their current look. And of course, Dan Simon will be back with another Studio Simon Stumper at the end of this episode. Right now, I'm very happy to be joined by Alan Miller. I almost don't know how to introduce Alan Miller right now because Alan is involved with so many things that you see on Twitter. If you are on Twitter and you're a minor league baseball person, there's Official League Hats, which is the new hat company that you started within the last year. There's the Collide Creative Agency. There is, of course, the Portland Pickles, where you've made perhaps the biggest splash on social media. And of course, as of very recently, you are the owner, president, CEO, grand poobah of the Lake County Captains. So, Alan, thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well. Busy as you could imagine, but all is good. It's good to have baseball back.
Holy smokes, is it ever? You are a repeat guest here, and I should tell you that the Portland Pickles episode that we did way back when, it remains the most downloaded episode of Baseball by Design. So all of the earlier episodes have more downloads because people go, hopefully they find the podcast and then they go re-listen to the back catalog. The Pickles episode, every time I check the numbers, the Pickles episode's the one that has the most downloads. And then oddly, the other Portland team, the Sea Dogs, is the one that has the second most. So the two Portlands have the most downloads.
Well, it makes a lot of sense.
I guess, right? Yeah, it's just people just out there searching Portland on their podcast downloaders. But it does raise the question, right? I mean, with the Portland Pickles, collegiate summer level team, a lot of freedom to do a lot of creative, funny stuff. You guys have pushed the boundaries on social media, not so much on the field. There's not a lot of wackiness. You don't have like the Savannah Bananas wackiness, right? With that, you've got your wackiness is more for like the marketing side of things, the Twitter sphere side of things. So I will say, I was a little surprised to see you get into the arena of affiliated minor league baseball. What made you get involved with the Lake County Captains?
Well, I think first off, I think we always wanted to give it a try. I think as fans, I think we start from we're fans of minor league baseball. We're fans of baseball. And I think we want to try to experience all parts of this. I think as being really good operators and marketers, I think it's important for us to learn how other leagues work and what restrictions they may have, what creative freedoms they may have. Affiliated minor league ball is where I fell in love with minor league baseball. I've been a huge fan my whole life. So it's I think it's a real honor. I think we feel very privileged to have had the opportunity. And really, I think one of the things that's really excited us is the opportunity to work with our parent club, which is the Cleveland Guardians, in a really special way, because our team is so closely located from a proximity to downtown Cleveland, that it really opens up an opportunity to do things that haven't been done in a market that share, major and minor league team. And we've really been blown away by the people there and their operation and how good they are at what they do. And we think we can add a lot to the market. And I think you put a few of those things together, it feels like a really good fit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at a work event in Cleveland. The Guardians were not in town. I went to baseballmapper.com and found that the Lake County Captains were the nearest minor league baseball team, and they were playing that night. And so I was able last April to get to my first ever Lake County Captains game. Got a great dad hat with the great Dan Simon logo that you're wearing on your official league hat right now. This nickname, the Lake County Captains, what can you, being new to the franchise, being new to the team, what can you tell me about, what the significance is of that logo and nickname to the Cleveland area community?
Yeah, and it's a really good, interesting question, and I think it plays to sort of that market. It's really, I've been fortunate to get to spend a lot of time there lately, and it's a really unique area, and just learning about east side of Cleveland versus west side of Cleveland versus downtown versus what is Lake County, and it's interesting because I think you've got a best of both worlds scenario there, because you are on the lake. I mean, Lake Erie is a way of life, and the stadium is less than a mile from the lake. And so it is absolutely a part of everyday life, from whether you're going to play or be rained out or be snowed out or be winded out. The lake is really important. And I think that from a nautical perspective, and this is where there are elements of this in the stadium and things we want to bring out more, but the stadium was built in a nautical theme. There are circular windows and various specific things that were built out to kind of build off of, hey, this is the lake team. And so having a aquatic captain, I thought was, a really good choice. And I think if you look around the league, all leagues, you really don't see many teams name the captain. So I think that there's a great way to stand out. I also think it's a great name from a perspective of, we're the captains, as what a captain is. But I also think it plays into, I like caps, and I think that from a CAPS opportunity, there's a fun way to kind of tie that in to build other nicknames. But we plan on fully playing off the aquatic theme and building from where it's at. And when you have a team that's been in the market for 20 seasons, you have multiple different rebrands. And for this season, we're going back to the original 2003 logos. We'll be playing in those uniforms and hat combinations throughout the season as well. And there's some great logos that are from the catalog. I think they've gotten to a place that got a little bit stale. But when we go back to the original marks, there's a lot of creativity, and I think a lot of good work in those.
So these logos that they were wearing in 03 to 06 and then 07 to 08, those are the ones the team will be wearing going forward.
Well, we have there's a lot of different combinations we'll be wearing. We will be wearing the whites. Our plan right now is to wear the original 2003 white uniforms in the home rotation. We also have so that's the original captain with the bat over his shoulder, the drunken sailor, we affectionately call him. So he'll be a really big part of our branding this year, and some signage and promotion. So we're really, I think, bringing back a lot of that character, in addition to the front-facing sailor as well, who's been used throughout that. I think the main logos, the parts that we kind of maybe want to shy away from now, is sort of the steering wheel aspect of the marks, just from they've actually, interesting, they've been using those so much longer than even the original marks. So it's kind of nice, and I think that it's a good thing to kind of remind the people. I mean, people have been going to games there for 20 years. I think it's a really good opportunity to go back and kind of just remember all those things and styles and players that have played there, because it's an unbelievable roster of players that have come through there. I mean, if you look at the Guardians right now, almost every single Guardian starter came through Lake County, and fairly recently too.
Right. The logo that's on your hat right now is the one that Dan Simon created, and I think it was 2009. Will that one be in play as well?
Yeah, no, we're using a combination of logos. I mean, we're still using some of the current marks. There is a process for change. I mean, we came into this process for this season pretty late to make a lot of huge changes, but we just kind of altered what was already, what we were planning on, and kind of brought out some of the things that we liked. In stadium, we kind of made some adjustments, little things to enhance parts of the current logos in stadium to make them a little bit brighter, cleaner, pop a little bit more. But from a merch perspective, it'll just take a little bit longer to get those in market. But there's some great one color options we're playing with. There's a lot of, I said, 20 years, there's a lot of great material to play with.
So what have you learned in your experience with the Portland Pickles, and also with the Cleveland Railroaders, which your ownership group is involved with? What have you all learned at that level of baseball that will be applicable here in the affiliated minor leagues?
I think it's a lot of the same things. I think and I think we've learned it over the years, from the lowest level to the highest level. You're dealing with a lot of the same issues. I mean, the major league business model is a different model, but from a minor league perspective, from minor league, collegiate, wood bat, independent, I think you're dealing with a lot of the same issues. Your business model's the same. You're a food and beverage business. You're selling tickets. You're creating great merchandise. You're selling partnerships. So I think there's a lot that transfers. Our strategy has always been to be more creative, to sort of come up with new nuances of local authenticity that we believe in and think it's really important. So I think what we really want to do and what we're doing is just carrying that over a bit. And we've got a great crew in Lake County, and I lean on them a lot because I don't know the market as well as I will in a few years. But we don't want to do something that's embarrassing to the market. We want to enhance the things that we think are great about it, things that we think are really powerful and fun and exciting. And I think that's no different than Texas to Portland to Ohio. We want to bring out the history in unique and fun ways. And that's, I think, we've had a lot of success with that in Portland. I think also people in Portland are very open and accessible to that from a media perspective. They've been really kind to us and given us a lot of great coverage, but I think it's transferable. And I mean, we'll find out if they kick us out this year and we're done, one and done. But I think from the early response and what we've been hearing from people, they're really excited to see what happens.
So I know that Dylan T. Pickle has taken over the Pickles Twitter feed. Can we expect a drunken sailor Twitter takeover?
Not in the first month. I actually have had some calls with Major League Baseball about said Twitter post, and I think there's time and place to be creative and to try different things. So I think we will come up with things. I'm sure we will get our hands slapped. But, I think, once again, when we're coming from a place of authenticity and really just trying to build these promotions and fun, I think for the most part, it'll be really great. Not too many Twitter takeovers yet, but I wouldn't put us past us, in the near future.
But speaking of that sort of thing, I mean, I think people on the minor league baseball Twitter community noticed right away that after you all took over the team, that there was more activity on the team's social media feeds. That's obviously a big part of your approach to marketing these teams. What was that conversation like with the team going in and saying, hey, look, we're about to start being real active on social media?
Yeah, I think it was positive. I mean, it's a really challenging thing when you've gone in one direction for 20 years and then I pop up and we're like, hey, we're going to do everything different. That's a challenge. I mean, it's hard for anyone in anybody's job or position to be like, well, we're going to try something new. And they've done a really good job of believing and buying into the story and the process and the levels of success that we want to get to, and we've seen it. Even our first month in, from a social perspective, we were one of the top teams of social media for the month. And not that that's a huge thing for us, but it's important to show the staff that we're moving in the right direction. These lots of little things will turn into big things. And, our goal is to build our fan base. And I think you've got to be very active socially to do that. I've never really understood why more teams don't invest in things like social media, more so just because it's the only thing that people aren't seeing. The only thing they're going to see if they don't go to a game every night. And I think we've seen it with our other teams, that the more active you are and the more you talk to people and the more you make fans one person at a time, they will come and they will support you and they will grow over time. So it's a long process, but we believe in it fully, and they're doing a great job with it. So it's not an immediate, like, here's what we're going to do. It's like, let's slowly build into things so everyone's more comfortable. I'll tell you, we'll be in a different place in 3 months than we are now. And hopefully it continues to get better and better as everyone gets more and more comfortable with the direction that we're going.
The social media, I mean, honestly, just like you're saying, I mean, it really is so important to building that brand. And I can speak to the fact that I own a Portland Pickles hat, at least one Portland Pickles t-shirt, a stack of Portland Pickles ice cream helmets. I mean, there's a lot of Portland Pickles stuff in my house. For someone who has never been to a Portland Pickles game, outside of driving through a corner of Oregon after dropping my daughter off at college, I haven't been to Oregon since 2008. So, the fact that I have all this Portland Pickles stuff and I haven't been there since before the team existed, speaks to that social media presence. I did go and, buy up a bunch of stuff at the team store when I was there at the captain's game, and they had a great selection. Like the team store was, the ballpark itself was largely, no frills, but the team store was really extensive. And I got a bright yellow dad hat, which, me and my dad hats. I love my bright colors on my dad hats. So that was a really good one. In general, though, with this team, was there something in particular about the captains that attracted you all, or was it an opportunity that became available? What were you looking for in a team to purchase?
Well, I think we were looking, and we've been looking for a while. I think what we really wanted was, I think we know what we're good at, and and I think we know what situation we're going to have the most fun in. And I think what the reality of that is that we're really good with sort of turnaround projects or teams that are not good at our strengths. And we would say our strengths are marketing, social media, innovations in technology, food and beverage. Well, those are things we're good at. We've done them for a long time with our other businesses. So when we see one that may be underperforming, or saying, oh, their food and beverage should be way higher, their social media should be way higher, their merchandise should be, when we see that and we're like, oh, well, why hasn't it been? And it's fair to say there are a lot of owners in this league who have teams for very different reasons. And some like it because they love watching baseball, and that's totally fair. And some like it for various reasons. I like it because I like to make hats, and we like to have fun, and we like to to be the epicenter of the community. We want to be able to creating storylines and entertaining people and creating things every night that they've never seen before. So when we see something that's, when we saw originally the captains, we're like, wow, they've been there for a long time, and I haven't heard much about them. I don't really know what they're about. And we saw it and like, wow, they've got great bones. The stadium is amazing. And we think what we do well can really fit very well with what they've already accomplished there. So we've looked at a lot of teams, and we're always looking at different things and opportunities. I probably should stop now, but we're always still looking at things just because it's it's fun. And this was a good fit, I think, for that, and especially part of that country. I'm always excited to explore areas that I haven't spent much time in, and I'll tell you, from us, all our partners have had a great time there, and the community is amazing. The great bars, great restaurants, great people, great beer scene, and that's kind of what gets us excited. And we say, oh, there really hasn't been a lot of craft beer and things put in the stadium. Well, it's a great opportunity for us now to go out to these companies and build out really fun programs for them. And we're building a 9-hole mini golf course out in out in center field, to create a whole new atmosphere and area out there. So like I said, we see things as we see them a little bit differently. And I'm just excited to see everyone's reaction as we kind of put on this show.
All right. Well, one last thing here, and you said that you're a person who likes hats. I've really been enjoying the official league hats, your limited edition hats for different teams. Always a surprise, every month, which the 4 teams are going to be that you put out there. So that's been really fun to follow. In terms of new hats, new things, are there plans for alternate identities, new marks for the team? Is there what's in store for the Lake County Captains?
Well, we do have a lot of merchandise we've been working on that will debut in April. So we've got a great new collection. There'll be shirts and hoodies and some great jackets and some really fun ideas, some throwbacks to the championship that the team won in 2010. Just a lot of really interesting, different kind of looks. So we're testing out a lot of different ideas for that. We are not going to do any alternate identities this season, and I think there's a couple reasons for it. I mean, one is we have a lot of brand things happening this year. I mean, we've got 3 different hats we're going to be wearing, from throwback hats in addition to the normal regular collection. In addition to that, we've got multiple jerseys, and this is actually where it's really fun. I've been working with the Guardians, on a couple designs that are very old school Indians inspired.
Nice.
That we're going to be wearing on our throwback Sundays. So there are 2 jerseys that are very, very cool, and I think will be very recognizable to fans, that we will be debuting. So those are going to be really exciting. But I think for us, it was really just important to celebrate the team name, Lake County, the captains, and not getting too cute this year until we learn a little bit more about the market. And in fact, we have a few really interesting ideas that we may want to put in for next season for for alternate identities. I think there's too many times they're done wrong or rushed. I wanted to make sure it was something that we really felt was something that we wanted to do and all were behind. So that would be great. I don't have any plans to change the name of the captains. I think it's a great name, but I do think it's probably time for a nice rebrand. And because there's so much history, and I mean, we haven't even gotten to this. They played 10 plus years in Georgia before even getting to Lake County. So between the Red Sticks and 20 years of captains, there's a lot of cool history. And I think when we'll look at, hey, a rebrand or some new design elements, I think we want to take from that whole history and maybe modernize things a little bit. But that's a fun project that we'll get to after we get everything else underway for opening day and all the fun stuff we've got this season.
Awesome. Well, Alan, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the captains. I know you have a lot going on. I hardly know where to send people to follow you on social media right now. So there's the captains, there's official league, there's the pickles, there's all the things we've talked about. Where would you like people to go follow you on social media?
I think those are all great places. You got to follow the Lake County captains for sure. Official league, definitely follow that. Like you were saying, there's so many great new hats coming out and other items as well. And then of course, everyone should be following the pickles by now. That's absolutely a must.
Alan, thanks so much. This is fun to catch up with you again. Definitely catch you at a captain's game in the next couple seasons.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm so pleased to welcome back to the podcast once again, designer Dan Simon. Listeners of this podcast may already be familiar with Dan's work. Dan has appeared on basically every episode. So Dan, thank you for being back. Thanks for taking time out of your morning to talk to me. I'm exaggerating a bit when I say you've been on every episode, but you certainly have been on every recent episode with Studio Simon Stumpers. This is not a Studio Simon Stumper yet. You'll be back later on in the episode with that. But right now, we're here to talk about your work on the Lake County Captains brand. Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing great. And I have not been on every episode, although now I'm a regular due to the Studio Simon Stumpers. So there's that. But I have been a guest to discuss a brand identity I've developed at least a dozen times. It might be more by now. Plus, there was the double episode turn the tables part. So yeah, I am a very good friend of the show.
So the double episode back around the holidays was the hostile Dan Simon takeover when you were the host of the podcast for 2 episodes. We introduced that with the clip from the movie Captain Phillips, I'm the Captain Now. And here we are talking about the Lake County Captains. You've done some work for this team over the years. There's a lot of fun details in these logos. For this brand, the team had a captain logo with the hat down sort of over his eyes and a baseball bat over his shoulder, a little bit cartoonish. You updated it for a much more contemporary look in 2009. You kept the character, and the sort of head-on version of the character has become a major part of this team's brand. I always ask you this question when you update an existing brand. What were the challenges in sort of honoring the team's past and bringing it into a more contemporary era of branding?
First, I should mention that the team, you just said that the work that I did was a more contemporary take on it. Originally, when they came to me, it was not supposed to be kind of a rebranding. It was more of a brand update. They wanted to take that, or the character in their original logo and other elements from their original logo, and just update it, kind of make it better. It served its purpose well at first, but there were one of the issues with it, and this wasn't a challenge for me, but one of the challenges for the team was, I don't remember exactly how many colors it had in it, but it had too many colors. In sports branding, the rule of thumb, and I don't know who originated this rule, but I have been abiding by it since I've been doing what I've been doing, is a maximum of 4 colors. Their logo, and again, I would like to do a count, but we're not going to do that right now. I think it had 8 or 9 colors.
I just counted them, Dan. And first of all, I laughed because my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Schimminger, always used to ask us to keep things to a dull roar. So I love that you pulled that expression out. Counting the white and the black, there are 8 colors in that original logo. And,
Yeah,
it took me a minute to count them because I kept losing count. 8 colors in a logo is too many.
right. So for me, it wasn't a challenge. The team had a challenge, which was a logo that was costing them unnecessary money. Okay, so that was one of my charges, was to get this down to a 4-color logo. So in the first round, I did do what amounted to a brand update, and that logo came out well. I believe that the client liked it, but for some reason they, to use a nautical term, decided to change course and take a different tack, and decided to do, as you described, what ended up being a more contemporary take on logo artwork for what amounted to a rebrand rather than a brand update.
Well, and you shared that original unused version of their updated look. I will share that. Stay tuned to my Twitter feed and Instagram. I'll post that up there at some point during the week when this episode goes live. But then the updated suite of logos had the boat's steering wheel. It had a lighthouse. It has, we talked about the front-facing view of the captain himself with his big handlebar mustache. And there's one logo here. It says Lake County Captains Professional Baseball, and it's got a very specific ship in it. I want to ask you about that. But also, I think importantly, the fact that they have this C logo for captains, well, they're, 17 miles from Cleveland, right? Like they are right down the street from Cleveland. So if you're a fan of the Cleveland Guardians and you see that this minor league team has a C with a lighthouse or a couple of different stylized Cs, maybe that C attracts you as a fan of the Cleveland Guardians. Was that part of your intent to create a C for Cleveland for the captain's logo?
Interestingly, no, it wasn't, because in looking back over my files, this identity was done, doing the math, 14 years ago. I wanted to reacquaint myself with not just the logos that made it, but also the ones that may have ended up on the cutting room floor, how the whole process went. And in looking back, the first Cap logo that I did for them was an LC for Lake County. And they wanted to, and it looked fine, but ultimately they just wanted to go with a C. I guess I always just figured, well, that's C for captains, but the point you make is a very good point, which is that they are, just outside of Cleveland. And there is a secondary logo that was worn and may still be worn as a sleeve patch on their, at least their home jersey, if not a home road and alternate, that features a steamship, the SS William G. Mather, which was a bulk freighter built in 1925 that is now harbored in, is that what it's called when it's just stays there, in Cleveland, or not in Cleveland, but on Lake Erie in Cleveland. And it's now a maritime museum, and they wanted that boat specifically featured. So even though they're, the stadium's located in East Lake, it's very much the greater Cleveland area. So if that C Cap logo, and then there's actually 2 different ones, if they create a tie to Cleveland, then all the better.
I want to ask you specifically, you said there are multiple versions of the C logo. One of them in particular has a lighthouse. I assume that is a specific lighthouse.
Yes, that is the Fairport Harbor West Lighthouse. And the reason it's called, so it's located in Fairport Harbor on a breakwater. And the reason it's the West Lighthouse is because there was originally a lighthouse that was just called the Fairport Harbor Lighthouse. It wasn't called East because at that point there was no West Lighthouse, so it was just the lighthouse there. But at some point that one was decommissioned and this one was built in its place, and that it is an icon on one of the iconic lighthouses on Lake Erie, right there in the East Lake and Cleveland area.
I found that lighthouses are like ballparks, national parks, amusement parks. Lighthouses, people will keep life lists of lighthouses. And I'm sure as a designer, you have to be very careful not to misrepresent any of the details of a specific lighthouse, because you may have people who are not baseball fans, but who are lighthouse fans who find this logo and want to have it in their, in their collection, because lighthouses are I know people who, when they travel, they will see what the nearest lighthouse is. So that logo, I'm sure, is pretty particular or important to people who like lighthouses.
It's not just with lighthouses, but it's important when not just me, but when anybody is developing a brand identity, that they get the details right, because there have been examples or instances where the designers have gotten details wrong, and immediately somebody will pick up on it. Especially with social media now, it'll get out there and people will point out any mistakes that were made. I can tell you on a logo I did, it was the Round Rock Express logo suite, which has since been updated by another firm. So my logo is not in place anymore, but there in the E cap logo, there were little rivets, and each of those rivets had a little white circle on it that was the highlight, so it looked shiny. And the rivets were not with the light source was not correct based on how I did those rivets on compared to the shadows in the rest of the logo. And somebody pointed that out. It's like, I screwed up. I made a mistake. So fortunately, those types of mistakes are few and far between, but they've happened since, and they might happen again. But I want to point out about this lighthouse. Yes, I did want to make sure I was accurate with its depiction, but I do want to say, when you look at the lighthouse in the logo, you can see it's kind of a conical shape. It's wider at the bottom and gets thinner at the top. That's not how the lighthouse is, but that was not a mistake on my part. You also notice the C in the logo. It's in perspective. It's wider on the bottom and smaller on the top. It's meant to look like you're looking up at something that's otherwise straight, vertical from bottom to top. But I wanted to give the impression of you're looking up at something, to give it a little more dimension. So I made the lighthouse have perspective.
Sure. Your description of that is reminiscent of the work that you did on the Joliet Slammers logo with the prison, where you're sort of looking up at it and there's a perspective on it.
Yes. So so if any lighthouse enthusiasts look at that and say, nope, he did not accurately depict that. Yes, I did. It's just done with perspective.
So I want to ask you about one last thing on this logo, which is an unused cap logo, which features just an anchor. And you sent me this one as well, and this is another one that I'll share online, because this is a really fun logo, and it was just a sort of flat illustration that you sent me, so I can't exactly tell, but so it had the anchor on the the front panel, and then did it actually have was the concept that it would be like a sort of like a gold rope across the front, like above the brim and in front of the front panel?
That's exactly what it was. I have a fascination with, as do I think a lot of other baseball fans of a certain age, with the 1 year existence of the Seattle Pilots, who were an expansion team who only ended up staying in Seattle for 1 year before they were underfunded. Back then, apparently, Major League Baseball did not do quite the due diligence they do now with new owners, and the owners that they awarded that expansion franchise to did not really have the money to run it. And after 1 year, they couldn't afford to keep the team. So that team they lost that ownership. The team was purchased by a guy named Bud Selig, who baseball fans might have heard about what happened with him. Of course, the later commissioner of baseball, but he bought the team and moved them to Milwaukee, and they became the Brewers and still are. But for 1 year, they were in Seattle, and for 1 year, their caps were blue caps, royal blue caps with a yellow S on it, and above on the crown, but just above at the bottom of the crown, just above the visor, was that you refer to it as a rope, maybe it's a braid, I don't know what it is, but that you will see on a sea captain's or a plane or jet pilot's cap. This is not a visual medium we're on now, but I hope people can envision what you go on an airplane, what the pilot's wearing, or you go on a boat, what the captain's wearing. Those hats had that little braid or rope across the front. And the Seattle Pilots cap had that. And I wanted to do an homage to that cap because that's my favorite cap of all time, is that Seattle Pilots cap. And here was my chance to do that. And it was presented, but ultimately it didn't get used. And I don't remember if it was just because the team didn't like the idea, or if perhaps it would have been too expensive to do that extra detail on a cap. But it got done on the Seattle Pilots cap back in 1969, so it could be done. I honestly don't remember why it didn't get done, but I do remember I felt it was a shame it didn't get done. It's one of the biggest what could have been. So
my head is so full right now that I'm just going to do a full just brain dump on you here. First of all, Alan Miller, new owner of the Lake County Captains, also owns a hat company called Official League, and they're doing all sorts of fun, wacky stuff with caps now. So I think we got to reintroduce this idea to Alan Miller to see if we can't get this cap made. I also need to say, on a recent episode of this podcast, one of the guests was my friend Chris Traban, who is a huge Seattle Mariners fan and loves that 1 year Pilots team, and he resents Bud Selig. So Chris is a running buddy of mine. We talk about baseball all the time. Totally resents Bud Selig for ripping the Pilots away from Seattle after 1 year, and was the coach of his son's little league team, named the team the Fort Collins Pilots, and asked me to create a logo. So I have created a Pilots logo that is based on the old Seattle Pilots because of Chris's love for the Seattle Pilots. So you and Chris Traban share that affinity for the Pilots. And then this cap is great, and I don't know, I could totally see it coming back in a contemporary sense now. So
well, I'm familiar with that cap company you mentioned. It wasn't one of the first caps they did one that was done for the Portland Pickles. Is that this? Am I thinking of the same company?
Yep. I actually have that hat behind me on the wall here. They also did a corduroy hat, and I love corduroy hats because one of my favorite dad jokes to tell is that, have you heard about the corduroy hats? They're making headlines.
I like that.
Dan, thank you so much. We're going to see you, or we're going to hear you back here on the podcast in a few minutes for a Studio Simon Stumper. In the meantime, Dan is on Instagram at Studio_Simon, and still to this day, not on Twitter, even though your arrival on Twitter would be a huge moment for all minor league baseball fans. Thank you for joining me, Dan. We'll talk to you in a few minutes.
Yep. See you then.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. I'm very happy to be joined right now by Brad Seymour, who is the president of the Windy City Bulls, a G League team, an NBA G League team. and former general manager of the Lake County Captains. Brad Seymour, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I have to say you're my first president of a G League basketball team that I've had on the podcast. So it's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm seeing some basketballs behind you. I'm seeing some bobbleheads behind you with some bull themes to them. So this is it. That's a first for me. But we're here to talk about the Lake County Captains. You started as general manager in 2009 before they rebranded with the current brand that they have now. And you oversaw that process. So I'll start just by asking you, what was the thinking in terms of when you came in as general manager as 2009 and you sort of surveyed the scene there and you thought, okay, we got to rebrand here. We got to update this look. What was the impetus behind rebranding with the team identity there?
Yeah, a couple of different things come to mind as I look back at that time. I joined the team in 2009. So, 2009, 2010, I worked, under the old brand, let's call it. And, I just kind of assessed the situation where I had come from a different team, the Lancaster Jethawks, and about halfway through my tenure there, we had decided to rebrand and just kind of freshen up the overall look. And the Lake County Captains have been in existence since 2003. And if recollection is right, I want to say that they had a couple of different iterations of a logo or a different brand or maybe a secondary logo that kind of came on. And the one thing I noticed, after kind of studying it, is that there was no synergy between the whole portfolio of brands. The primary logo, which is actually a cool little logo, and but there was no synergy with what the jerseys look like, for example, and different fonts, just a completely different look. And so that was one thing that stood out to me. And I think just the desire to want to update, maybe modernize the look a little bit, and just create something that I thought could be better. And ownership thought, let's take a look at this. And so, fortunately they supported the decision to move forward with it. I immediately, reach out to Dan Simon, who I had gone through the process of rebranding the Lancaster Jethawks with, knowing he's the best in the business, in my opinion. And, the other thing is, Dan is going to walk you through the entire process. And that's what the most interesting part was to me, is from the first day until the last, moment. Dan is so thorough with everything. And so that's also what made it an enjoyable process.
In terms of the name itself, when you came on in 2009, the team had been there for about 6 years at this point. Mm-hmm. When I tell these stories, they're very frequently I'll think, okay, well, that's pretty simple, straightforward. There's in this instance, the team's right on the water, and they're called the Captains because there's a lot of captains of ships and boats out there on the water. When you came on with the team, was there anything beyond that in terms of the significance of the name, like the reason that the name Captains was chosen for this team?
That's the main reason. The ballpark sits less than a mile from the shores of Lake Erie. Obviously being one of the Great Lakes, there's a lot of shipping that goes on out there. And so it was kind of a natural fit. And the cool thing, and this all happened before me, is that, the team dove headfirst into everything. There was, one of the signature parts of the stadium, and I think it's still there, is a working lighthouse out in center field. The merchandise store had a nautical theme to it, through and through. The suites, you would see the nautical theme weave in and out. So, from the get-go, they did a really good job in terms of, taking that theme of the Captains and then branching it out and really making it an immersive experience when you're at the ballpark as well. It's an important part of that community. It's certainly something that when you live, right on the shores of a major, shipping or lake that has shipping, then it's a natural fit.
Absolutely. But before I move on to my next question, did the Captain have a name? I don't think I've heard a name for the Captain.
No, there is no name. At one point, we had a character that worked on game days. That was a captain that lived in the lighthouse, and he would come out and greet kids and take pictures, and he was dressed up in it as a captain, and that character has gone through different names depending on who was working it. But the logo itself per se does not have a name. That captain does not have a name. The mascot's name is Skipper.
Okay.
Looks nothing like the logo. It's basically a takeoff of the Philly Fanatic. And so, but again, you see that nautical theme weaving into that part of the operation. But no, the name of the I guess the captain on the main logo does not have a name.
Okay, interesting. Well, it feels like an opportunity here for the team's new ownership right now. I hope they're listening.
Go.
So this brand, even though it's a character, right? Like it's a captain character, it would have been pretty easy to get pretty silly with this, with a sea captain character or a lake captain character, but it's still a fairly serious brand. Was that an intentional choice from your part as general manager?
Yeah, from the get-go, one of the first thing Dan asks, and he did it both times that I worked with him on these types of projects, was, do we want to go the quote silly route? Do we want to go more traditional route? And from our perspective, and as somebody who was kind of leading, this project, I am more of a traditionalist, and so just looking at Dan's work across the board, no matter what he has put together, it's always a nice, clean, professional look, and I think it does a great job of capturing, what is important to the community. I know we talked a lot about that when we were going through the early parts of the project. We would just brainstorm about, different words or talking points about what is important in the community. And but Dan knew from the get-go, we weren't going to go too wacky, so to speak. And he did a really good job of not only capturing that, but like I said at the beginning, he does a great job, and this was really important to me, is just creating that template, that portfolio of brands that you can use in any manner, but they all tie together. And that was really important to me. The jerseys, the secondary, even third logos, the word marks. But we did it in a way that I thought was, representative more of a traditional approach. And, Dan's credit, he listens to you, and that's certainly the direction we took with this project.
This captain's logo came out in 2003 at a time when minor league baseball logos were really ramping up into an era of just wackiness, right? Like, and that has been ramping up and has continued unabated, right? Like, and it's with alternate identities. There's no sign of this slowing down. I think you've seen it some in minor league hockey, and maybe somewhat like a little less in that the level of basketball where you are right now. Do you anticipate minor league baseball's wackiness finding its way into other minor league sports?
That's a great question. And I agree. I mean, I worked in baseball for 21 years. So I started in the mid 90s and then, left for basketball in 2015. And so I saw this entire evolution of, going from teams that a lot of teams just carried their parents' name. I mean, I started with the San Jose Giants, nothing crazy and wacky about that. But I remember vividly the Chattanooga Lookouts and the Carolina Mudcats came on, and it revolutionized kind of the way everybody looked at their teams. And that kind of, if I remember correctly, that's what started it. I remember ordering those hats because they were so unique, and obviously we've seen where it's taken it from there. But you're right. I see in hockey that you'll see some silly names or whatnot. Basketball is a little bit different, and part of that, at least in the G League, Most of our teams are owned by the NBA parent, and so a lot of the teams in this league have taken on the same moniker as the NBA franchise. But that being said, you know, there's several of us that have come over from baseball, and so we are, I think, starting to influence maybe that alternate identity, you know, process. And maybe I've seen a couple of teams, you know, do it more on a one-off basis, where you can get creative. The Wisconsin Herd, which are owned by the Milwaukee Bucks, come to mind, but once a year they become the Wisconsin Curd, and it's all about cheese curds, and it's wildly successful. And I think you're going to see a little bit more of that with some of the progressive teams in our league, at least. But by and large, it's pretty by the book, you know, where you're just kind of an extension of the NBA parent.
Brad, I appreciate you coming on and taking a couple of minutes to talk about the origins of the current brand in the Lake County Captains and some comparisons to different minor league sports. Where can folks find you on social media?
I'm really not on social media. I have a Twitter account, and to be honest with you, I don't even know what the name is. I don't really do social media.
This is why you seem so relaxed and happy during this conversation here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Brad, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking time out of your morning, and good luck to you to the Windy City Bulls.
Thanks, Paul.
It is time once again for Studio Simon Stumpers. This has become such a staple on the Baseball by Design podcast. I love it so much. I love getting to sit with you every week, Dan, and hear what terrific trivia you have come up with relevant to the topic at hand. This week, you and I have already spoken about the Lake County Captains, but now you're back with a Studio Simon Stumper, a trivia question about lakes or counties or captains. Mustaches. I don't know. I can't research these things in advance because I never know where you're going to go with them. So let's see where you're going with the Lake County Captains Studio Simon Stumper.
Where we're going with this one is based on something we already discussed, which is specifically the Fairport Harbor West Lighthouse. So, as I mentioned, one of the Lake County Captains on-field caps features the letter C, and in the counter of that letter is this lighthouse. And so our question is about the lighthouse, which it has operated since its lamp was first lit in 1925, but was deemed excess by the Coast Guard and put up for auction in the year 2005. After defaults by the winning bidders of each of the first 3 auctions that were held to sell this lighthouse to a private owner, a successful sale was finally made to the fourth bidder in 2011. So our question asks, what were the plans this individual had for the lighthouse? What was this individual going to do with it? Was it going to be A, a summer home, B, a museum, or C, a seafood restaurant?
See, I never could have researched this. Okay. A summer home, a museum, or a restaurant?
Specifically, a seafood restaurant.
A seafood restaurant. Summer home is the wackiest. I feel like I'm on Wait, Don't Tell Me right now. Summer home is the sort of wackiest of those. Museum, you wouldn't have asked me this question if the answer was museum. Museum is too boring an answer for that to be the answer. A seafood restaurant is also pretty basic. I'm going to say it's got to be summer home because that is the most outrageous thing that you could do with a lighthouse, just buying it for no reason. I'm going to go A, summer home, final answer.
You mentioned how much you love doing these stumpers. First of all, I love doing them. I love coming up with some connection to what we're talking about and doing the research and coming up with a question. But I also love hearing you, I think you referred to it as sussing it out. Is that the expression?
Sussing it out is a phrase I've used many times. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And you have nailed a number of these. Sometimes you miss, but I think you've answered correctly more than you have answered incorrectly. But your thinking, even when you answer incorrectly, is always spot on. In this case, you did not answer incorrectly. You got it right. The lighthouse was purchased for $71,000 by Sheila Consol, a marketing executive from the DC area, who announced that this would be her quote unquote personal summer home. And it would be also, quote unquote, the ultimate lake house. She purchased it, I said, back in 2011. So that's 12 years ago. She still owns it. She's still working on it, but it's you can imagine a lighthouse. It's not just the lighthouse. There is an attached 2-story keeper's cottage. And it's on a lake. It has weather events, cold and rain and waves and things like that. This lighthouse is not like a lot of lighthouses right on the coastline, like on shore. This is on a breakwater that was built, so it's very difficult to get things to it. When she was renovating it, there were certain things that had to be brought to the lighthouse by boat. So it's been a very long and arduous and difficult task, but she's been a trooper and she's stuck with it. So one of the other things, here's an interesting little tidbit about this lighthouse. The shell of it was not built on site. It was actually built in Buffalo, New York, and transported 170 miles across or down Lake Erie by steamer to Fairport Harbor, where this lighthouse is located. So I love lighthouses. I'm not a lighthouse enthusiast, but anytime I'm anywhere where there might be a lighthouse, I want to go see it. So
this was a rich vein for possible trivia questions here too. This was, the fact that it was built in Buffalo, that one I probably would have gotten wrong, right? So that is a lot of fun. As we talked about earlier on this episode, people love lighthouses, people collect them, they visit them, especially people love the water. I love the ocean. I love a giant lake. And, what a setting for a ballpark and for a lighthouse turned summer home. What a great thing.
One of the real challenges, you always ask me what challenges were there in developing a particular identity. One of the biggest challenges is there's no running water there. Because and one of the things she said is she never imagined that a lighthouse on a lake would have a problem with, on a freshwater lake would have a problem with getting water. Think of the irony of that. But so there's no shower there. So she, quote unquote, showers in Lake Erie. So apparently it sounds more to me like she bathes in Lake Erie. I don't understand how you can shower in it. It has a full-on kitchen. It has multiple bedrooms. She actually added bedrooms. It's got a lot of the creature comforts, and she has electrical power that is both. There's solar power, there's generator, and there was one other thing that through which she gets electricity. So you can live there, but you can imagine with no running water, there are certain things you can't do.
Dan, I'm so glad to know this fact, courtesy of Studio Simon Stumpers. I appreciate you coming on every single week. We will talk to you again next week for another Studio Simon Stumper. Thanks, Dan.
You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to the next one.